El Zorro Plateador presents Myths for Today's Man. Stories, fables, and tales for a world in chaos. The Saint Who Stove Through Mountains. The flatlands of northern India are covered in farms and fields. As the sun beats down on the land, this area of India becomes harsh, dry, and hard. Though people make their living off this land, the soil is dusty and rocky, and the farming is difficult. Crisscrossing these plucky agricultural plains are long walls of ancient mountain ridges, rising up through the fields like giant saw blades. These enormous geological features are remnants of the plate tectonics that forged the Himalayan mountains a half-day's drive north. Here, in the Gaya region of India, these jagged-toothed ridges loom hundreds of feet above the fields and run along for, in some cases, 30 miles. These enormous outcropping ridgebacks vex the local community and create irritating and dangerous obstacles, especially for the poor. And then there is India's caste system, which makes the lives of the people among the lower classes much harder. Amid this rocky terrain lived the Musahars, a caste of landless laborers who were regarded as the lowest of the low and denied access to water, electricity, schools, and basic medical services. Life in India was hard, yet its terrain sometimes makes it harder. Nestled at the foot of one long, formidable snake-like ridge was the tiny hamlet of Gelur, inhabited by these poor farmers and workers. The villagers accepted the presence of this narrow, dangerous ridge looming between them and the richer, more developed towns on the other side. This tall ridge, called Gelur Ganj, barricaded the village from life and work on the other side. Because of India's dry climate, this mountain ridge is not softened by trees, shrubs, or a layer of dark soil, but is instead steep and covered with knobby crags of rocks and dust as fine and gray as ash. All of the available jobs lay on the far side of this ridge, and the commute for the villagers was dangerous. The trails over the Gelur Ganj were treacherous to climb because they were not really trails at all, but simply paths of stone that switched back and scrambled their way past the terrifying faces of rocky cliffs looming overhead. These trails were unforgiving. The dry terrain of the paths over the ridge was completely uneven, offering no flat surface, nothing but sharp stones and the likelihood of twisted ankles. The dryness and heat of India prevented soil from accumulating and thus smoothing the rocky terrain. So the villagers of Gelur had it rough. Along with tolerating the degradation of the caste system, they had to endure the danger of climbing over the mountain ridge or face the inconvenience of walking around it. Only the most sure-footed of the villagers could cross the ridge, as it was too dangerous for the very young, the injured, the elderly, or the careless. If you could not climb the paths over the ridge to the richer towns on the other side, the walk around Gelur Ganj took nearly 7 hours, leaving only the strongest able to go to work. Medical emergencies posed a special danger for these people. In the event of a complication during childbirth, a respiratory problem, or a pulmonary issue, there was no fast way for the villagers to get help. The ambulances had to show up and then drive the injured and the sick the long way around the great ridge. It was not uncommon for these villagers, while gravely ill, to wait needlessly for medical attention. There, in this badly located hamlet, a man named Dashrath Manjhi made his mark on the world. Manjhi was born in 1929 and as a young boy ran away from home to work in a coal mine. He later plowed fields and worked as a laborer near his home village. His was a life of toil and struggle. There in his village he married a woman named Faguni Devi, and together they raised their family. In 1960, while Manjhi worked jobs on the far side of the ridge, his wife brought him supplies of food and water. But she had to clamber up the dangerous trail over the ridge. One day he was cutting wood when his wife fell and twisted her ankle, dropping the pot of water she carried for him. Manjhi was infuriated. "That mountain has shattered so many pots, claimed so many lives," he later reflected. "I could not bear that it hurt my wife. If it took all my life now, I would carve us a road through that mountain." So began his great labor. He would make a road, a channel, a shortcut through the Gelur Ganj. Manjhi asked for help, but found none. He begged for local government officials to cut a route through the ridge, but they ignored him. The ridge, they maintained, was part of a natural reserve and thus protected from development. In his frustration, he thought, "Everyone has to be born, eat, earn money, and die. Why not do one thing in this life to make a road through this mountain? One that is beneficial for the whole of society." With the support of his wife, he sold his 3 goats and bought tools to break up rock, a hammer, some chisels, and crowbars, and in his spare time, he set to work on the inconceivable dream of opening a mountain pass at a low point in the ridge. Manjhi was already inured to a life of toil, and once he began, he never stopped. After working the fields of others, plowing and gardening from 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon, he would climb the mountain and chip away at it from afternoon until sunset, and then again from 4 in the morning to 8 in the morning. The other villagers thought he had gone mad. Soon the news of his project spread, and people everywhere told him that he was crazy, that he wouldn't be able to do it, that he was just a poor man from the unwashed caste, that he just needed to stop. "Why are you doing this?" they would challenge. His family believed Manjhi would kill himself doing this impossible task. But he believed he would never die. He said that his work would uplift many people, uplift his parents, then uplift the village, then the whole region. This was his life's great mission, so he kept cutting at the mountain, working, banging, hammering. He kept steadily at it, and his accomplishments slowly began to add up. To weaken the rock and make it easier to break up, he would light a fire upon the stone to heat it up and then douse the fire with water, and then he hammered away at the hot, brittle rocks beneath. It has been estimated that during the 22 years he worked on his path, he chipped off a piece of rock the size of 1 grapefruit every minute. But despite this relentless progress, people over the years forgot about this crazy man on the mountain. No one cared about him or his dream. After 10 years of this brutal toil, the other villagers began to notice that the silhouette of the mountain had changed, that the toothed profile of the mountain ridge looked different. They realized, in their astonishment, this crazy old mountain man was actually doing it. And the villagers stopped calling him crazy and began to bring him food. Then his work finally paid off. After nearly 20 years, everyone could use the road he made. Through this ridge, he had hewn a rough channel of an incredible dimension, 25 feet deep, 30 feet wide, and 360 feet long, meaning per day, Manjhi cut away an inconceivable 33 cubic feet of rock. Manjhi saw people begin to take his road, but he also wanted the surface to be finished. He pleaded with the local government to lay down gravel, sand, and to tar his mountain pass to smooth down the rocks. Again, they did nothing. Others recognized Manjhi as a kind of saint. He became famous among the region, and the news media began to listen, so that as he neared death due to cancer, Manjhi was heaped with honor. He finished the road in 1978, and his wife died a few years later. Perhaps because of his low-caste birth, it was only after his death in 2007, at the age of 78, that the government honored him by naming the road after him. But all his life, Manjhi remained humble. "What I did is there for everyone to see. When God is with you, nothing can stop you." One can glean lessons of great value from Dashrath Manjhi: that your public service can supercharge your desire to act, that the great obstacle before you and your resolve to surmount it has the hidden power to bring you fame, that your background and social status probably won't matter much, and that without your obstacle you will remain just a regular Joe, and thus be unable to turn yourself into the hero you might become. We might wonder now what went inside the mind and heart of Manjhi. Let us speculate how he, while clanging away upon the knots of rock, sweaty, exhausted, hungry, alone, during the middle of the night, in his mountain quarry, amongst the great terrible sharp peaks of the Gelur Ganj he so fiercely hated, grew to love it all. Perhaps in the face of those cliffs, he also saw the face of God, the face of love. But let us now leave the great Saint Dashrath Manjhi and ponder this. What reveals the hard way? How can you see the hard way? And why should one bother to seek it out?